Hey everybody, and welcome to the Growth Experience Podcast. I am your host, Chris Dye. Our hope is that by listening to this podcast, you realize that you have a gift. And by believing in your gift, you can uncover your purpose and have vision for your life. Whether you're listening in your car, at home, or watching on YouTube, thank you for tuning in, and let's go! Hey everybody, welcome to the Growth Experience Podcast, episode 10. I am your host, Chris Dye. Very excited for today's guest, today's episode. Really a guy that I admire, that I look up to, and I have tried to not be on the comparison side of things for a little while now. I'm doing a little bit better, not comparing myself to people, but if I did, this would be the guy I would do it with. Raphael, super... just a motivated, inspiring dude, and we'll get into that today. So I thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Super exciting day as well. We've picked up a new sponsor for the Growth Experience. This is somebody that I do business with real estate closing. So thank you so much to Rocket Title. Rocket Title is an honest, efficient, reliable real estate closing company, a full-service land title and escrow settlement provider here to protect your real estate investments. When you work with our knowledgeable team, you will be guided through the process in a transparent and timely way. So yes, I use them often for our buyer clients. Sometimes people want to use somebody else specific, but 80% of the time we're going to Rocket Title. They always take care of our clients, even if we don't have a client with them, but we're representing a seller client. They're always available to pick up the phone, answer our questions. So thank you so much to Rocket Title for sponsoring this episode, and we'll dive right in. So Raphael Collazo, right?
Collazo, yeah.
Nailed it.
Double L.
Nailed it.
Double L's in Spanish is yeah.
Yep. Nailed it. So, man, crazy story about how we got connected. I went back and did some homework on all of this, and we'll flesh it out. But this guy, man, 5 books now?
6, almost 7.
Almost 7 books that you've written, right? Commercial real estate agent with Grisanti Group. Mm-hmm. You have a Commercial Real Estate Academy Podcast, right? Is that what it's called?
Correct, yeah.
I didn't mess it up.
The Commercial Real Estate Academy, correct. That's our podcast.
So everybody check it out. And then, Louisville Real Estate Investor Meetup Group, right? Mm-hmm. Still doing that?
Yep, still going. It's almost 4 years now, which is crazy.
Right,
yeah.
and that's actually how we got connected. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about that. But no, man, really excited for you to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to be here. And, we've known each other for almost 4 years now. And we started the same time, so it's been pretty cool.
Yeah,
we took the test, I think, the same day. I patted you on the back. I was like, hey, man.
We did, yeah. Well, just crazy how our, we're not super connected in what we do. I'm residential, you're commercial, but just really even how, just like you said, how we got started was kind of nuts. And so, I just want to dive in, talk about you, give us some background info, and tell us what you're about.
Yeah, so, do you want me to start from the beginning or just in general?
Yeah, your background, where you're from.
Sure.
I kind of watched a clip of you give a BNI presentation, and I didn't, I guess, know this, born in Italy, right?
Correct.
An Army brat.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So my dad was a pediatrician in the Air Force, and so he was stationed in Aviano Air Base, which is a big air base in Northeast Italy. Met my mother, and then had my brother and I. I'm a twin, a fraternal twin.
Okay.
And so we traveled around Europe most of my childhood. We lived in Germany for a couple of years. Then we were in Belgium at SHAPE, which is Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers Europe. It's like NATO headquarters.
Yep, a lot of friends that have served over there.
Oh, you have, yeah. It's very diverse. People from all over the world. My friends were Polish, Czech, Italian, Turkish, you name it.
Right.
I had people from all over words because of the fact that it was NATO. So you had people serving in the military in all these different countries that would converge in that location. So it was a really good experience for me.
Yeah.
I moved to the U.S. when I was 14. I went to high school in Southern Arizona, and then I got a scholarship to go to ASU to study engineering. I did that for about 4 years, and after that, I got into software development and consulting with a company that implemented software systems for government agencies, and then I went around the country, lived in D.C., I lived in Puerto Rico for a couple of years on a big tax software project, and then I moved to Louisville, Kentucky after Hurricane Maria. The project got put on hold over there, and we got relocated to here to Louisville. It was supposed to be temporary, turned into more permanent.
Right.
But I saw the opportunity in Louisville. I left my job before because it was very transitory. We're moving every other year.
Sure.
And, the job was intellectually stimulating and great, but again, I wanted to build something for myself. And so back in 2017, 2018, started looking at ways to essentially transition away at some point. And then I made the leap in March of 2019 and, been operating in the commercial real estate space since July when I got my license.
Yep.
Or I passed the test. So,
Yep. Yeah. No, that's awesome. So why Louisville, Kentucky?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, we were here already, so that's number one. But
Right.
number two, I do see the value in the middle of the country in particular.
Sure.
Louisville has a lot of unique things about it that I really like. Obviously, there's a pretty big international community. Love the fact that you can go to all these different restaurants and places and engage with people from all over the world.
Right.
Pretty close by. So I really, really enjoyed that. And like I said, I mean, we're very central to a lot of locations around the country that are growing. Nashville's just south of us. Indianapolis has a lot of growth. Cincinnati's not too far away.
Right.
So we are a very central location. And I just saw an opportunity the long term. And hopefully with what's going on in the market right now, we can hopefully start competing more competitively with some of these other cities as well.
Yeah, I think I read that, and you're a super smart guy, so you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong. But I think I read that our economy is right on par with these bigger cities, Indianapolis, Nashville, that are around us, but our housing situation is way behind in the real estate side of things. And, doing what you do, are you seeing an influx of people coming in to Kentucky or if they're trying to purchase businesses or multifamily? I know you do a lot of that too. Do they live in the area? What does that look like demographic-wise?
Yeah, I think the shifts demographically are interesting. I think right now what we're attracting is a lot of industrial, so a lot of logistics companies, Ford relocated, or building a big battery plant.
Yep.
So I think that's a lot of the businesses that are starting to move to Louisville for obvious reasons. I think from an industrial standpoint, we can reach 80%, or I think it was either between 60 or 70% of the U.S. population within a day's drive. So from a hub standpoint, it's a very central location.
Yeah.
You got UPS here, FedEx, so obviously that benefits you if you're going to be moving product around the country. As far as other projects are concerned, we do have a growing population. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we have, we're a refugee city, as you probably know.
Yep.
And so we have a very large population of immigrants that are coming to Louisville, primarily Cuban immigrants. There's this gentleman called Luis Fuentes who runs El Cantacubano. It's a big periodical for the Cuban community here, and he was on a TV station in Miami talking about Louisville and everything else. And he was saying at one point last year there was between 700 and 1,000 Cubans moving to Kentucky on a monthly basis.
Wow. I didn't know that.
It was pretty significant. And the Cuban population has been growing pretty rapidly over the last decade.
Yeah.
So, that's just one demographic. Obviously, you got other countries around the world, ministry work that's taking place in that community as well. So the immigrant population is growing, and over time, their children and everyone else are going to be participating in the economy locally. So
Sure. No, that's really cool. I didn't know. What's the guy's name again?
Luis Fuentes.
Luis Fuentes.
Good guy. Really good guy.
And he's in the area too?
He's what?
He's in the area as well?
Yeah. Actually, I don't know. I think he may live in Frankfurt.
Okay.
But he's always around Louisville, in and around areas. So,
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Totally unrelated, but I'm a music guy, trumpet player originally. But Arturo Sandoval was one of my favorite guys to listen to, and I watched his documentary actually about his life coming from Cuba to the States. So shout out to Arturo. I don't know if you'll ever watch this, but I appreciate your music, man. It's awesome. Well, cool, man. So I want to dive in, as far as accomplishments go that you have really sunk your teeth into, and just talk about why, when did you start writing books? I think so when you and I connected, you messaged me about, was it your first Millennial Playbook?
No, I wrote that in Puerto Rico while I was living there.
Okay.
So that must have been 2016. And I had been writing it for a little while.
Yeah.
But it all started, I guess, back in Puerto Rico. I was working at a pretty lucrative job down there, and, my apartment was literally a stone's throw away from the beach. from all intents and purposes, when people look at it, they're like, "Oh, this guy must be great." But inside, I felt lost and confused.
Oh,
and,
wow.
You know, you're a kid, and you don't really know what you want to do with your life, and you know,
Right.
you're kind of out of whack when it comes to, you know, your priorities. And so I was, you know, in that moment in my life, just didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I ended up doing a lot of self-development, self-research, getting into, you know, trying to better myself. And through that process, I started a blog called The Strong Professional.
Yep.
So I started writing blog posts every other week that we just talked about a variety of different topics, both personal and professional development.
Right.
And over the course of, you know, about a year and a half of doing that, I realized, I have like 30,000 words here already.
Yeah.
And I had read an article that said that a 200-page book was 50,000 words. And so I was like, well, I'm pretty much almost there. So might as well add whatever I need to the book, round it out. And that's essentially how the first book was written.
I gotcha.
And then from there, you know, I started a series, which, you know, again, took all the concepts of the first book, but then extrapolated on it.
Sure.
So in the book, I talk about personal development, professional development, exercise, healthy eating habits, and finances. So each of the subsequent books focused on one of those key topics.
Right.
And then obviously, when I got into commercial real estate, you know, you start working with clients and you start getting asked the same questions, and you're like, well, there's probably a need here as far as being able to provide something that people can reference to help them through the process. And it helps me too, because, you know, I can provide a book to someone, and as soon as they read it, their expectations are set. They understand what the process is going to look like, and I know that they're willing to move forward with it. Because sometimes, especially, and I'm sure in residential it's the same. It's you know, people have like the idea of something,
Right.
but they may or may not be willing to put in the work to get there.
Sure.
So that's just kind of like a litmus test to say, oh, okay, they seem serious about moving forward.
Right.
And not only that, but it makes the transaction go so much smoother because now I've already, you know, you've set the expectation. So.
Right. No, I love that. It's basically like, you know, we talk about systems all the time in business. So you're basically creating your own system, like you said, as a litmus test to see how serious somebody could be about taking that next step, whether it's, you know, through business, renting a commercial space, you know, whatever that looks like. I know before you sign that lease, I think is one of your books. Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. So I want to pick at something real quick because I think it's really, really cool. So you said you were kind of like, so 2016, how old were you?
25.
Okay. So we're like the same age, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm 32.
I'm 32.
Okay.
I just turned 32.
Man, this is crazy. All right. So, so I want to kind of dive into this a little bit. So you said you were kind of like trying to just figure out what you were doing, who you were, like not really fulfilled, right? You had a lucrative job. You were at the beach. I wish that I lived on the beach right now, originally from Florida. So that sounds pretty sweet. So you created this blog, right? And that blog, yes, it had great information in it, but initially it was just for you, right?
Yeah,
it was an outlet for fulfillment, right? To give out that information. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, starting something without this big expectation behind it, which is exactly why now I feel like I'm having some success and consistency with the podcast, is because this time I went into it with, I just want to do it for myself. I just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Can you kind of pick into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's probably the single most important thing that keeps people from doing anything is that they don't want to go through the process of sucking at something to start. You know, I'm an engineer by trade. I was never a good writer. You know, that wasn't my strong suit. So the fact when I started writing the blog post, I'm sure if you go back and look at some of the blog posts, you're like, man, this, you know, I mean, it's information dense, but it's not written or conveyed in a way that's very effective.
Sure.
But that's the process that I took over time to get better. So now, like, I view myself as a very good writer and also an excellent communicator because of the fact that I took the time to sit down and think through my thoughts and, you know, say, okay, if I could write this better, you know, how could we approach this process? So as far as starting out, you know, again, I think you have to have the expectation that you're not going to have a lot of eyeballs on it, which is actually better for you, really, because if you think about it, you may be embarrassed about the fact that you're writing something that may or may not be great.
Yep.
You don't have to worry about it because most people are going to watch it anyway. So you just put it out there, and then over time you just improve.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's the biggest hurdle. Consistency is the biggest thing. Yeah. You know, just getting on a schedule. And then setting and then holding yourself to that. You know, every Monday I release a frequently asked question video on my YouTube channel.
I see that.
And every Monday it's like, whatever I do that day, that needs to get done because I know that 10 years down the road, that's what's going to eventually, you know, lead to a variety of different opportunities. So
I love that you just pointed that out. 10 years down the road, right? It's not about, because you're 100% right. Like when I go back, even now, 10 episodes into this thing, and I go back and I like watch or listen to the first or second episode with my mom that we did, I'm like, man, I've even gained so much more experience in communicating with, whoever we're interviewing, even in just 2 months, right? And so I think that's super important. One of the things that, as you talk about this, do you know Lewis Howes?
yes.
Okay, so his plug for Lewis Howes podcast, not that he needs it, but the School of Greatness, great podcast. He was actually on a pod with Ed Milet here recently, and I listened to that one, and he talked about 3 things and that he wrote in his newest book. And he talked about the fear of failure, the fear of success, and then the fear of judgment, right? So, like, I am not necessarily, I don't have, like, a fear of failure. I don't know. Maybe you're probably wired the same way, I feel like, to where I'm a high optimist, right? Like, when I think of something that I want to do, I don't know why, but I can't see myself fail. I don't know. That might sound arrogant. I'm really not trying to be arrogant, but it's just the way my brain is wired, right? Fear of success. He talks about how, like, yeah, you might actually achieve success, but then you're unfulfilled when you have it, and you're afraid to achieve it, so you never really reach for it, right? And then the biggest one I think that, could have affected myself and what you just talked about is the fear of judgment, to where it's like, hey, I'm not going to start that podcast. I'm not going to write that book, because if I do, even if only one person reads it, they're going to think it's terrible, right? And so I think that is, you're 100% right. Just where people, wherever you get hung up in your process of what you're trying to do, you got to just strive past that point.
Absolutely.
And once you did that, how easy was it to write the second one and the third one and the fourth one?
Yeah, once you get in a rhythm, it just becomes part of it. It's like your daily routine type thing. So there was a point there where I was writing 250 to 500 words a day, like, for years.
Yeah.
So I got, I would churn out a book every year, and they were between 200 and 300 pages.
And did you have that time blocked out too?
In the mornings, yeah. I had morning routine. I read this book called The Miracle Morning.
It's a good book.
And then, kind of followed along with it. So you did the meditation, praying, you did the exercise, you did journaling, you did, all that stuff. And instead of journaling, what I would do, I did the 5-minute journal, but then I'd also, take, 30 minutes or 40 minutes or however long to write.
Yeah.
And once you start getting into a rhythm, the words flow more freely, because I know when I first started, you stare at a computer screen for an hour and you don't really know what to write.
Yeah.
But once you start getting into a rhythm, it just flows more freely. And, one piece of advice I would share with writing is that you don't ever edit when you write.
Right.
You focus on editing later.
That's good.
Just throw it on the page. It doesn't matter if it sucks. If when you edit it later and you cut it all out, that's fine. But it's all about the act of writing, is what you're trying to do.
That's good, because I'm totally that person that, like, even if I misspell a word or I don't, say something that I'm intentionally trying to say, I'll hit that backspace button.
Yeah.
So that's good, man. And I have, like, I've had that. I'm just now, I'd say over the last year, become more cognizant of how consistent I am in the habits that I'm trying to build, right? And so for a long time, again, my brain's wired to just be this big visionary type person, and I was terrible at implementing, right? Implementation. And so that's, this year I try and pick like a word at the beginning of the year. I'm not like a New Year's resolution kind of guy, but for this year, as I wanted to start the podcast, I wanted to be healthier, man. I wanted to take care of my body, get back to where I was before injuries, before surgeries, before gaining a bunch of weight. I just picked the word discipline. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be consistent in my habits. And, what that does is it just shortens the gap from where you want to start to where it actually flows, like you said. Because when you first get started, it can feel like a wide gap in your mind, and that's what prevents you from either getting started or really getting that flow going. But once you do it again and again and again, like I told my wife, and this is an example of, like, first of all, you really need to have important people around you that you tell your dreams to, that you tell, they can help hold you accountable. And a significant other, a spouse, is a great person to do that, because my wife had no qualms with calling me out when the night before I said, hey, I'm going to set my alarm for 5 o'clock. She's like, are you really? And I never did, or I did, but then I'd hit snooze. I was a snooze guy. And I said, I have to go to bed at 10 so I can get up at 5. And we'd stay up late talking, right? Well, now that I've been consistent over the beginning of the year up until now, and doing it every single day, 2 things have happened. One, she no longer questions me, like when I say, hey, I'm going to go to bed at 10 so I can get up and go to the gym. Because I've proven now that that's what I'm going to do. And then second thing was, like, I set my alarm for 4:55 pretty consistently, and the other morning I woke up at 4:54. So, like, my biological clock, even yourself, right, that gap has been shortened from where I needed the alarm to now I really don't even need it. So yeah, I'm sorry, super long tangent there, but this is such good stuff. I didn't want people to gloss over how important consistency is, but then also, and again, Will is on the wall, not in the corner, permanently, I think now. He has access to my calendar. He sees every morning. I schedule when I go to bed. I schedule when I wake up, to make sure that I have that consistent habit. And, you habit stack. You can build one thing at a time, 2 things at a time. Sometimes it's hard if you're trying to chain 10 things at once, right? But that's what's worked for me. So I'm glad to hear that that's how you did it.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, a massive amount of things that compound, right? There's a book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy that kind of changed my life, and the way I approach every day is that, small, positive, consistent action over time adds up to huge results.
Right.
So if you do the math, let's say one example that I found super profound was the idea of, if you cut out, let's say you want to lose weight and you drink a Coke every day. It's like, if you cut out that Coke, that's like 200 calories right there.
Right.
A pound of fat is 3,500 calories.
Yep.
So over the course of half a month, just over half a month, you've lost a pound.
Right.
So you do that over the course of a year, 2 years, then you start losing weight. And what happens when you start losing weight? You get more energy. So what do you start doing when you get more energy? Well, now you go to the gym, or now you do other things. So it stacks on top of each other. It's not just a linear growth. It is an exponential growth.
Yeah.
But it takes you doing that every day to do it. And it doesn't, again, it's a very simple thing that you changed, but now it's hopefully long-term going to change the trajectory of your life.
Oh, for sure. I'm committed now. That's what I tell her, is I'm committed now. Even I used to make excuses. The kids didn't sleep well. Like, Matthew literally slept in my back last night, my 4-year-old.
In your back.
Yeah, like crawled into my bed, like shoved his head into my back, and he snores like a freight train. We're fixing that towards the end of the month. He's having a tonsil and adenoid surgery, but my gosh, man, when he's around, I can't sleep. So yeah, I was up since 3:30, 4 o'clock, but just gotta go. Just gotta go do it. And maybe I'll go to bed a little bit earlier tonight and catch up on that sleep. But no, I love that. Can you kind of dive into as well? You talk about these consistent habits. What I don't want people to miss is, and we already said it, but I'm just gonna hammer it home, is that you can have expectations, but you really need to set your expectations on the long term, especially for these big sweeping habits that you have, right? Like my buddy Justin, he said, you said 10 years. What is that going to look like in 10 years if I do this consistently? We talked about what we're trying to do with EXP now that I've been with EXP Realty for a year and a half. And we have some pretty big ideas and some things I'm really excited about. And Justin even said, like, hey, what is this going to look like because he's 40, I'm 32. He said, what's it going to look like when you invest in this vision for the next 8 years, right? Not just the next couple months. And so just like I said, want to drive that home for people as you now, you started your kind of entrepreneurial journey with books, right? To a degree?
To a degree, yeah. I had a small catering company in college that I had.
See,
it's called Plasticity.
You've been doing it forever, man.
Yeah, but that was more so, and I want to be very clear. Like my parents were extremely supportive of everything I've ever done. Right. So it starts with them. Sure. It starts with my grandparents. The struggles that they faced in their lifetime, right. And that's why I do what I do on a day-to-day, because I don't want to ever let their sacrifices be in vain.
Love it.
So that's where it started. The idea of just kind of saying, oh, well, my grandfather obviously from Italy, and he was one of the best cooks I've ever met in my life. And so the germination of that idea started. It's like, why not just take his recipes of just cooking whatever and then just start selling it in college? I mean, college kids love pasta.
Yeah.
So, that's how it started.
It's cheap, bro.
It's cheap and it tastes good. And, you can make it in bulk. So we would buy like these massive bags. I mean, we'd buy, at the restaurant, like warehouse, I can't remember the name of it. It was Restaurant Depot or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the facility was, but you could buy like these 50-pound bags of pasta. Yeah. And we would literally buy like 2 of those things, and every Sunday, because I was in a fraternity, we would cook it all, right, and then literally just take it to the meetings and just be like, all right, who wants? And we're hawking pasta to all the people there, and then we'd do small corporate events, and we did. A bunch of different organizations on campus would just say, hey, can you cater our event? And
That's killer, bro.
Yeah. So that's how it started, and then that's kind of how I knew that I want to do something along those lines.
Sure. No, I think for 2 weeks, I had one time for 2 weeks in college, I had a coupon for free Papa John's pizza, and they never would take the coupon when I ordered it, so I did that for 2 weeks straight because I didn't have any food, and then I ate. I would go buy the cheapest thing at that time. Now that just ballooned is eggs. So, yeah. I ate free pepperoni Papa John's pizza and boiled eggs for 2 weeks, and that was an experience. I couldn't eat boiled eggs for like 7 years.
Oh, no.
It was good. So starting your entrepreneurial journey there, started writing books. At what point, you're looking at this real estate thing now? What tripped that wire for you?
So my mom started in residential real estate back in 2010. Just right after the crisis, and she's been operating in that space ever since. And she does very well for herself in Arizona. Okay. And so she wanted me to get my license when I was in college.
Gotcha.
But you don't. Unfortunately,
listen to your parents.
I was like, I'm just gonna do this, study, and then go to do engineering, and then, I obviously did that for a little while and realized, no, that's maybe not what I want to do long term. And so when I started looking in 2018-ish, let's say, I talked to my mom, and she's like, why don't you just relook at getting your license and see if you want to kind of jump in there. Right. And so, I looked at both residential and commercial, and, commercial kind of spoke to me more regarding, because you're working with business owners, you're working with investors. Right. I could utilize my, my experience on the engineering side to potentially provide some value there. So, that's kind of what made me jump into that space. But,
Yeah. So it was so funny. I was working in construction at the time on a multifamily project, 288-unit apartment complex in Louisville, and I was listening to a Bigger Pockets podcast. That's what I said. I went back and made sure that I wanted to get the time frame of this exactly right. So that was at the beginning of the year, I think, January, February, on Bigger Pockets with Brandon Turner and David Green. They talked about how important like local meetups were, and I was like, okay. I always have had an entrepreneurial bug inside of me, but I didn't know how to get it out, right? Because there were nobody in my family's entrepreneur. They just blue collar, work hard, come home, be with your family, and that's all well and good. That just never fit for me, right? Sure. So I look up local meetup groups in Louisville, Kentucky. Your name was on the Bigger Pockets website. Reached out to you. You said, hey, let's meet up and talk about it. This was March 2019. We actually met in April 4th of 2019. I went back and looked at our messages. Before I went in to talk to you, I was on the phone with somebody else who's a residential and commercial real estate agent. And they said, because I'd been talking to him about like wholesaling, trying to get into the investing game, and he's like, Chris, you need to get your license. You need to get your real estate license. You were made to do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I felt that little kick in the butt. And then I sat down with you, and you started talking about your meetup group, and then you also said, yeah, I'm actually studying to get my real estate license. And I was like, okay, God, I hear you now. I'm going to go do it. So, and then, like we kind of met there, split up a little, went our separate ways, back and forth banter about, you like commercial, I'm thinking residential. What firm are you going to join? Where am I going to go?
I remember that. Yeah.
And then, I'm sitting in the testing center beginning of June, and then I feel this person tap me on the back, and I turn around, and it's Raphael. For almost 4 years, man, we've kind of just like intertwined every now and then, which is really cool. Can you talk about? I know you have, and you've been with Grisanti that whole time, right? Since you've been licensed. Yeah. So which is really cool. Again, you're a model of consistency. So I've kind of flipped around, and done a couple different things, but can you talk about the value that you went into Grisanti with? What did they kind of show you? Why did they stand out? And then, what areas you work in and what you do.
Sure, yeah. So the reason I chose Grisanti, so I interviewed with a couple different brokerages. I just fit best with, the Grisanti group. I think part of the reason is, it's a family office. They've been in the business for a long time. Paul himself used to run the restaurant for Grisanti's, so they have a lot of experience in that front. And again, I think the Italian connection helped a lot too. Yeah. And, I don't know. It just felt like more of an environment where I could, they would invest in me.
Sure.
Some of the other brokerages, and I'm not going to mention names or anything like that, but, it seemed very much like, it's like, all right, you get out there and you figure it out.
Right.
When, and that could work for a lot of people. But for me, it's like, well, if I could shorten the timeline and you could, invest in me by, being resources and, kind of taking you under wing or whatever else, like I felt like that was a better fit for me. And so luckily I found that with the Grisanti group. And ever since I started, I've been somewhat of a generalist over the last several years, but I've started doing a lot more in the retail space. I've done a good amount of multifamily as of late too. And I really want to get more experience on the industrial front. I've done a couple leasing deals on that side. And, Nick Grisanti with our office does a ton of land. I mean, if you go to Mount Washington, all across Shepherdsville. I mean, he's got like...
Didn't he have the land listed right there that Zaxby's purchased in
Washington? Zaxby's, Wendy's, literally all the land out around the Kroger there. Like, that's all Nick's listings and stuff.
Gotcha. So I drive through there all the time.
So it's been like, he's been... I mean, he hasn't been responsible, but he's been facilitating the growth in that corridor for quite some time. So he's very well-versed in land acquisition, land law. He works a lot with developers, so he understands what developers look for when it comes to these types of properties. So I've learned a lot from him on that side as well. So, but I would say my focus areas of late has been a lot of retail.
Yeah.
I've worked several franchises, investment property, primarily on the shopping center side.
Gotcha.
So,
and is that something that just kind of came to you as an opportunity, or do you enjoy it more? What does that look like?
I enjoy it a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the big reason I enjoy it is because you get to work with people who do so many different things. I mean, I've had clients that own rug cleaning businesses. I've had clients who own wholesale businesses for convenience stores. I've had, fast casual clients. Different restaurant clients. Like one of my clients that I just executed a lease deal with, they're going to be located on Main and Clay. It's a restaurant going to be called Cured, and it's going to be opening in June. It's going to be a really cool spot once it's all said and done. So. I could utilize some of my experiences from the retail side on my own in my own life.
Sure.
Because I managed a restaurant for a few months after college as well, so I got to see the inner workings of how restaurants work. So I could provide that context as well.
Yeah.
But I think more so than anything, it's the fact that I get to work with people who do so many different types of businesses and understand how their businesses would fit into a space and what their needs are is kind of what I like.
No, I love that too. And maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like a lot of people talk about commercial in just a sense of like, well, it's all numbers driven. If the numbers don't make sense, then there's not a lot of emotion involved like there is in residential. But it seems like when you're working with somebody who wants to open a business, right, and they're looking for the perfect location. Like I remember I just talked to her the other day, a past client of mine. She needs to go ahead and do it. Ashley, open it up. Because every time I look at her social media, the baking that she does is absolutely incredible. So I just touched base with her, and I know that when she's ready to open it up, I've already sent her to you. But I feel like that could be a space where you are actually emotionally connected to your client as well, because they're trying to create something and build something that can support them and their family and the community.
Absolutely. And I think it's a misnomer to say that commercials void of emotion.
Sure.
Like, yes, there's definitely more numbers, especially if you're talking about on the investment side, but you still deal with people, and people have emotions, whether that's, another thing that you deal with a lot is egos.
Yeah.
You have people who, say, oh, I'm not going to, pay more than this. And it's like, well, if you really sit down and figure it out, it's like, we had one deal we were working on that almost fell apart over like like compared to the transaction size, it was a really small amount. And so we did the math. We're like, this is not a $10,000 problem. This is a $44 a month problem.
Right.
So when you break it down like that, it's like, well, yes, you're right. So, because so it's one of those things where you're always it's a people business. Sure. So you still have to be able to learn how to interact and deal with people and navigate different personalities. And so, but yeah, I agree. I think there is obviously that numerical component to commercial real estate, but at the end of the day, it's sales, and you're having to deal with people and try and navigate situations the best you can. So
that's interesting to hear, because most in the residential world, that's what everybody says, and I'm like, I really don't feel like that's the case, because we do the exact same thing when you're talking about when we're sitting down with a client, and they have, obviously we're never going to push somebody into a situation where they're climbing way up on their pre-approval if they can't afford it or things like that. But when we say like, hey, this $10,000 on your mortgage, right, from this house that you really are settling for versus the one you really want, it's really a $60 a month problem, right? And making sure that they not just hear it from us, but also, your vending partners who you have around you. When we're connecting them with our lenders, our insurance people, title people, that's why love working with Rocket. But, these people we're a team, right? And we're trying to help people understand what that process looks like. So, I don't know, that's really cool that you kind of shed some light on that for me, because that's not the word on the street here about commercial.
And I think part of it is the I don't know how to describe it, but people make it seem like it's more than it really is.
Right.
I mean, again, you're dealing with people. This is a people business.
Right.
And, I've had many instances where I've worked with investors, and, think about criteria for investors, right? I mean, you could have one investor who has a certain set of criteria and the other investor who has another set of criteria. What's the difference between those two criteria? Right. Their comfort level with moving forward on something.
Right.
And that comes from internally, right? It's all feelings.
Yeah.
Because an investor could say, oh, I can't pay, that because of this and that and this and that. It's like, well, there's another person over here who can. So what's the difference there? They're more comfortable with moving forward under assumptions, right? So it's still psychology. It's still,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm actually, almost 4 years in residential. Obviously, you see something new every day. I'm dealing with something new right now that I've never dealt with before, but I'm working on it. But I feel really comfortable in that space. And so I've talked to you a little bit about the nonprofit stuff that my mom and I are doing.
You did.
So I'm actually about to close on my first commercial
Congratulations.
property, God willing, here in the next 30 to 45 days. So I'm really excited about that, and already have it's funny how I've talked to you about, hey man, what's the land development code and zoning this, and diving into all that stuff, which is super fun to read. Wink, wink, not really.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, it's a struggle sometimes to get through some of that stuff for me. I'm too ADHD for all that, but I love having the information too, so where you can speak intelligently about the zoning of the properties and why you can do this and why you can't do that. So yeah, I'm really excited to start maybe dabbling in that space a little bit, and trying to learn more about what that looks like. But man, I want to talk about one more kind of personal thing that I'm hoping people can connect to you with, is just the idea of this. I just love how, like I said, you're just a model of consistency. Like even as we talk, you're just super even keeled. You just go for, what you're looking for, what you feel like you're supposed to be doing. And you don't let anything, that fear of failure, stop you. So can you, again, just talk about, maybe do this. Can you name some people that have been influential? You talked about your parents, you talked about your grandparents, as to what is your why. Why are you doing all of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to accomplish?
Sure. So yeah, I'd say my family's huge in that regard. Obviously, my wife. I think what it comes down to is that, we're all here for a reason, and I believe, right?
Yeah.
I think God put us on this earth for a reason,
Right.
and I think He gave us talents that can be manifested in reality,
Right.
and it is our service to that mission
Love
to
that.
manifest that. And so the fact that I've been given, in my opinion, what I believe is a lot, I need to be able to manifest that in reality, and if I don't, then I'm disserving what I've been given. So, that's my reason for wanting to do it. And that's the fear too, right? You still have fear of failure. Like, I don't want to let my family down. Like
Right.
that's what wakes me up every morning. I'm just like, okay.
But see, that charges you,
Oh yeah.
right? Not prevents you
Correct.
from
Yeah.
reaching for those things.
Exactly. And you still deal with things. Like I deal with imposter syndrome a lot too.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, who am I to say this? Because
Sure.
there's people in the business for 30 plus years that have not written a book, for example.
Right.
And I've had people talk to me. It's like, oh, so how long have you been in the business? You've written a book? And it's like, well, yes. But if you think about it, if I write the book, I'm writing to a certain audience that
Right.
has never gone through the leasing process. So if I'm writing that book, it's for the person who's
It's a
never.
wide net.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even that. It's like, way more about residential real estate than anyone normally that just buys a home once or twice in their lifetime, right? So you could write a book that could explain the entire process, that could provide them with significant value.
Yeah.
And that you have the capacity to do that.
Right.
And so that's the approach I've chosen to take. And on the Millennial Series books, for example, it's like I'm just documenting what I've learned,
Right.
I never claim to have these unique revelations or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, But yeah, imposter syndrome is a real thing, and I
Right.
think people who have a drive are always going to have it. You're always going to have something in the back of your head saying, "Who are you to do this?" or
Right.
"Who are you to say this?" But you got to just quell that voice and let it happen. So
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I've had a little bit of that too, as even starting the podcast, to where it's like I talked about Lewis Howes and the School of Greatness, Ed Milet. These guys that I'm talking about that I follow. They just, it's like you look at their stuff and it's like, hey, you're kind of in the same lane. But again, the audience that you're reaching, we all have a different audience. We all have different people that we can connect to. I don't, some of the people that listen to this, the growth experience, aren't listening to Ed Milet, right? So what I can take from him, what I can take from my own personal perspective to give to our audience is valuable to them, like you said. I love your, obviously, the idea of serving, right? Service to me is doing something with no expectation. And that's where we talked about previously, like taking the limit off of I have to do this thing in 1 year, in 1 month, right? Or maybe it's 10 years. I love that you talk about that, and that's something I'm diving into myself, and what you've just described, your version of success is becoming the best version of yourself, right? Like that charges you to go out every single day and achieve what you're trying to for the people around you, because they've invested in you, right? And when somebody invests in you, you should want to reciprocate that investment, return the investment, work super hard, impact people at a high level. One thing I'm throwing around that, I'm a little biased, but me personally, talking back to that Lewis Howes podcast, he talks about the idea of success versus greatness, and that greatness is, his idea of greatness was it's not just about me and personal success. I'm on this journey right now, and it's a profound idea that I have not even tried to really grasp yet. But what is your legacy? Right? What is personal success versus your legacy? And your legacy is something that you leave behind. Well, you can't leave something behind that you don't have, right? So how you live determines what you leave, which is your legacy. How are you impacting every single person around you, your family? How are you impacting the organizations you're a part of? How are you impacting your communities, your church? Wherever you are every single day, you should be trying to make positive deposits into that environment. And I know that you do that. Like every time I see you, whether it's out and about at a networking event, or you coming into the podcast, or the upper room, which we've been to a few times. I've been slacking on getting there on Fridays. So I've been going to the gym in the mornings, and I live in Bardstown, Kentucky. But
so that's a big. I think that's the determining factor.
It kind of hits my time frame a little bit.
Yeah.
But man, every time I see you, that's why I said I've tried to jump off the comparison train. I'm doing pretty good at it right now. But the things that you are achieving and accomplishing, I look at more as inspiration now rather than just competitive motivation trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve. This is a different track for me, right? So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll leave you with that. That's something that has been really at the forefront of my mind. It's like, why am I selling houses?
Yeah.
Is it just to sell houses? Because if it's just to sell houses, it's probably not the right thing, right? So I've had to dig a little bit deeper into my why about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and who I want to impact.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I've kind of had questions on in the past, it's like, what is your passion, quote unquote? Because I think that's also a misnomer. It's like, are you truly passionate about bricks and mortar?
Right.
The idea of passion comes from manifesting your talents in the world and serving others. So the real estate in our regard is a vehicle to achieve that.
Yep.
But whenever I hear people saying, "Oh, I'm not passionate about something," it's like, well, you need to reevaluate how you're serving because maybe you're not serving in the way you should be serving.
Yeah.
So that's my advice that I would share because I just think that I see a lot of people out there that are just trying to search for that quote unquote passion when in reality if you manifest your talents and you're excellent at what you do.
Yeah.
Naturally, you're going to be excited about doing it because you can help others, achieve whatever their goals are.
Right. And here's the thing, too. You're not willy-nilly walking through life, whether you believe in this thing called God or not, right? I really feel like you should evaluate that you're not walking through this life just walking around like a zombie, right? There's a purpose for what for you, first of all, and then, what you should be contributing, like you said, in the earthly realm, right? And, one of the things that I believe is that if you'll serve the purpose for the season that you're in right now, your passion, your calling, your giftings will find you, right? You're not always having to be in pursuit of this mystical thing and trying to figure it out, right? While you're doing that and you're down about what you're not achieving, there's somebody next to you probably that needs your help, right? That needs you to serve them, that needs you to lift them up, right? And in turn, once you figure that out, like you said, it shortens the gap, and you're able to see that stuff. It comes more frequently for you, more consistently, and it's frankly easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it, man. Okay, we could probably talk all day. I say that literally every single week. This feels like a good. Any last thoughts on that? Because I loved, what you said as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. I think that just control the controllables is all it comes down to. Is that I think a lot of people get caught up in the news media and they get caught up in all this external stimulus that in reality has nothing to do with what you personally can control.
Right.
So if all you can do is get up every morning and just try to do your best every day, be consistent about what you're doing, and then try to help others, you will leave the world in a better place than you left it. And that's all you can control.
Yeah.
And in the comparison game, like you said, my journey is different than your journey,
right?
Then different than the next person's journey. So all you can do is just do the best you can each day, and that's all I would say as far as advice.
Absolutely. You can't change the world until you change you.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you are the only thing you can control.
Right.
You can't control other people as much as you may or may want to. Right. You may have your spouse or kids or whatever else. I mean, they're individuals. They're human beings, and they have their own way of thinking and everything else. And the way that they do things, even though you may or may not agree with it, is the way that they're operating. So what you can do is yourself is just act. You are a model to those individuals. So if you can model what you want to see manifested in the world, hopefully at that point, others follow.
Yeah, I literally read in my devotional this morning from John Maxwell. He says, if you have children, lead them. It's a leadership devo. And, two of the things, and I'm blanking on the third one, there were three principles. One was, it's funny that you say that, modeling. And the third one, which stuck out to me the most, was memories, right? And everybody's heard that quote, like, people care about how you make them feel. They remember how you make them feel, right? And, that's one of the things that as we impact people, as we serve people, I mean, that's the most memorable thing for me. Some of the times, I have won an award here, done this, done that, sold a few homes. But, Miss E, one of my favorite clients, when she's crying because she's lived in the same rental house for 15 years, never tried to get pre-approved. She gets pre-approved for a home. We get her in a beautiful house, and how emotional she was. She, we text every now and then. Excuse me. She asked me, "How are the kids?" And that's what I want to create. That's the legacy, right? That's how I want to leave people and impact people at a high level.
For sure.
Cool, man. Okay, so for real, wrapping up this time, because I do that every single week too. 3 questions I've been asking people at the end of the episode. So the first one, and I know you probably have them, just you rattle off 10 probably, but what are some of the most influential books, podcast speakers that you're on kind of right now, or that has really, like you said, changed your life?
Yeah, I mean, the compound effect, number one, probably, just because it was that moment in my life where I needed it, and I read it, and there was just a light bulb. It was like, wow, because you're always comparing yourself with people who are achieving great things, and it's really hard to bridge the gap a lot of times. So that idea was instrumental. There's so many great books that I've read. There's one book by Stephen King called On Writing. It's not a fiction book. It's not like a lot of the stuff that he writes, which is more horror focused, but it's truly his biography and how he approaches the writing process. As someone who writes a lot, I just remember reading it and I said, wow, this guy is an absolute technician. I mean, the guy writes like 2,000 words a day, and he hasn't missed in decades. Wow. So, I mean, outside of, I think he got a bad accident a long time ago, and I mean, for that period of time when he was in the hospital, I mean, you can forgive him for not doing that, but that was a great book. I mean, there's just so many. I probably could share a lot, but those 2 stand out the most.
What was the second? On Writing?
On Writing.
Okay.
By Stephen King.
Okay.
And I think maybe it was a little bit more impactful for me just because obviously I've been writing for so long now, and I don't deem myself an excellent writer. I mean, not to the level of Stephen King or any of these other like career writers. But I just remember sitting there and I said, man, this guy's a true technician of the English language. Yeah. And the way he describes life and the way that he, is able to elicit emotion from you based on, different stories that he's had in his past was just, unbelievable.
I'm going to check it out. So I'm actually so my mom is in the process of writing her first book.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's doing really well. I read a piece of it yesterday, very raw, very real. That's her life. And a lot of the truths that she's lived are hidden to this day from other people. So she's trying to get the truth out there of what this stuff looks like. But I'm going to write a chapter into that book. And so that'll be my first experience. I enjoy writing. I have to make myself sit still for a long time to be able to do it. So for even just taking the advice that you've had, hey, maybe I just sit down and, 100 words, whatever, every morning.
You can talk too and just transcribe it.
I can talk. I could do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you could literally just, sit there and just transcribe it and just talk into something. And then there's like a site called rev.com. And you just have it transcribed. And, from there, you're just editing. You're kind of putting it together.
I got you.
And maybe create like a structure. I'd do like a book outline or something, or a chapter outline or something to kind of make sure that you're sticking to the topics. But
sure. Rev.com.
Rev.com.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check that out. Perfect. And then the second question I've been asking people is, you could go a litany of different directions, but what is a piece of advice? Let's just stick with commercial real estate, especially me. I'm trying to get into that space too a little bit. What is some advice for new commercial real estate agents from your perspective and your journey of how you started?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say get ready, because especially if you're just doing strictly commercial, it's can be brutal the first year because you don't do any deal. You do very little deals. Right. I mean, I think I did. Well, granted, COVID happened too, but I think I did 3 deals my first year. Yeah, it was pretty rough. But
you didn't quit.
I didn't quit. But luckily, I had a pretty lucrative job before. I saved up a lot. I bought a 4-plex, house hacked that, and that's what enabled me to do it. Otherwise, I don't think I would have survived.
Sure.
The first year. So that's what I would say is, get ready as far as, if your finances are concerned to maybe not make any money for 6 months,
right?
Maybe a year.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, 6 months for sure, but, if you want to save more, then obviously that's great. Yeah. And that's if you're strictly focusing on commercial.
Sure.
And then from there, just, be consistent and understand that that it doesn't happen immediately.
Right.
So you could be working a lot and it just isn't. It's not manifesting itself.
Yeah.
And deals take a long time. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we say that in the residential world, and the time span may be longer in the commercial space, but we say, hey, if you don't work today, you're not getting paid in 60 days.
Absolutely.
60 to 90 days.
Yeah,
right?
it's all the pipeline, right? So, you may have a lot of work right now, but if there's nothing in your pipeline, and what, 30 to 40% maybe closes, maybe.
Right.
So you better be,
on it. Continuing to push that through.
Absolutely.
I got you. So we talked about, you're not going to be able to top your pasta catering business. That's awesome. But what was your first W-2 job?
Busser at Chili's.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually worked at Chili's for 2 years, and then all my experience prior to getting into engineering was restaurants.
I did not know this now that, like I do now. That's awesome. The Southwest, I haven't been to Chili's in a while, but the Southwestern egg rolls are fire.
Yeah, there was the sampler or the
the appetizer.
The appetizer.
Sampler.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, those things. There's like the beans and the chicken.
It was a fun job. I mean, I was 15 or 16 at the time, and obviously, I was really excited to get out there and bus tables and stuff. And the servers loved me because they would essentially give me the whole shift, and I would just be running around the restaurant and everything, and they'd tip out at the end of the night and stuff.
Sure.
So I did well for at that time, being in high school.
How much do you think you were making then?
I mean, I don't know, maybe like $80 a night, tips, and then I was making maybe $3 an hour.
Right.
So I would make, depending, I'd make $100 a night, maybe $110 a night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that too, because like especially in the restaurant business, we interviewed Gustavo a few weeks ago, and he talked about how he started out as a dishwasher, and so like just seeing the climb from him, from you. I think there's something in there, like working at the literal, bottom of desirable jobs within the industry and kind of climbing the ladder there. Yeah, that's interesting.
And I would say with restaurants, I mean, I learned so much from being in the restaurant business. I mean, you deal with all different types of people. Right. And I mean, if you want to be in sales, I would say obviously door-to-door sales, I'd say would probably be the number one if you're to be an actual, great at that. And then obviously the restaurant space. I mean, you deal with people every single day that have different desires, different demands. Some people are difficult to deal with.
Right.
They send stuff back. There's nothing you can do that is right.
Yep.
So you learn, okay, it's not about me. It's about the fact that, they just are in that mind state at that moment in time. So I'd say there's very few jobs that are better for sales than to get into at least serving in a restaurant.
No, that's great advice too. I kind of cut my teeth in the retail space.
Yeah, retail too.
Yeah, and that was a similar concept. I was assistant manager at a car wash, and somebody would slam on their brakes and go over the rollers, and then two cars would hit each other, and you figure out real quick that the best way to solve that is, hey, you get a free wash next week, And so, how can you cater to the customer? Customer's always right, that old adage, right? And, being on this side of the fence as the professional real estate agent, people want to know your recommendations and opinions and help guide them too. But yeah, that was a good space for me to kind of figure out how to interact, how to talk to people, and how to serve people, right, at a high level. Awesome. So I'm not going to flub it this time. But again, I want to thank Rocket Title Group in Louisville, Kentucky. I love you guys, appreciate you guys. They're an honest, efficient, and reliable title company, full-service land title and escrow settlement provider, here to protect your real estate investments. When you work with their knowledgeable team, you will be guided through the process in a transparent and timely way. Matthew, love you, man. I appreciate everybody at that office. We always have our meetings in that building on Mondays. Wave to them. We talked about intermittent fasting yesterday and just, random stuff. Created great relationships with them. So if you're looking for a title company, does not have to just be in the Louisville area for residential real estate. They will and have travel everywhere, which is also what I love. They go above and beyond for the client and the customers that they serve. So thank you so much, Rocket Title Group. And at the end of every episode, I leave everybody with this. You have a gift. It's time to grow in it.